The marketplace of Zara burned. Drums echoed across three kingdoms. Men on horseback carried torches. Women grabbed their children and ran. Somewhere in the smoke, a priest lay bleeding on the ground, gasping, his golden beads scattered across the dirt like broken promises. Nobody knew yet that it would end like this. Nobody knew that the two men who were never supposed to love each other had started a war simply by doing so. But to understand the fire, you must go back to the beginning, back to the cool mountains of Kano, where two strangers locked eyes across a crowded festival, and the whole world shifted beneath their feet. If you're coming across this channel for the very first time, kindly do it to subscribe, like, and share. Now,
The kingdom of Adara and the kingdom of Seoul had been enemies for 40 years. No one alive could fully remember why. The hatred had simply been passed down like land, inherited, unquestioned, heavy. Prince Toby of Adara was 32 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with long thick dreadlocks that fell past his jaw and were threaded with small copper rings. His skin was deep brown like river clay, and when he smiled it was slow and rare, the kind of smile that made people feel chosen. He had come to Kano for the Harmattan festival. Not for love. He came because his father, King Ade, had sent him to build trade relations with the northern chiefs. Business. Duty. Nothing more. Salem of Seoul arrived the same evening. He was 35, lean and sharp-featured, with a close-kept beard and eyes the color of amber. He wore white robes trimmed with gold thread, and he moved through the festival crowd with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his peace. They met at a food stall, both reaching for the same skewer of suya at the exact same moment. Their fingers touched. Both pulled back. Both looked up. Neither spoke for a full 3 seconds. "You go ahead," Toby said finally, his voice low. Salem smiled. "No. Please." They ended up sharing it. By midnight they were still talking. 7 days. That was how long the festival lasted. Toby told himself it was harmless. Two strangers in a foreign city, far from the politics of home. Salem felt the same. They were simply men, not princes, not enemies, just two people who found each other interesting. They walked the old stone streets of Kano together in the early mornings before the city woke up. Salem told Toby about the rivers of Seoul and how the fishermen sang at dawn. Toby told Salem about the red hills of Adara, how the soil turned orange after rain. On the third night, they climbed to the rooftop of a guest house and watched the stars. "Have you ever wanted to just stay somewhere?" Salem asked. "Somewhere no one knows you?" Toby looked at him sideways. "Every day." On the fifth night they kissed. It was quiet and unplanned, like something that had always been waiting. Neither of them made it dramatic. But both of them knew, in the silence after, that something had changed permanently. "This is a problem," Salem said softly. "Yes," Toby agreed. "You are Adara. And you are Seoul." They sat with that truth a long while. The city hummed below them, unbothered, indifferent to their war. "We should end this here," Salem said. "Before we go home." Toby studied his face in the dark. The amber eyes. The careful jaw. The man who listened like the world could wait. "Can you?" Toby asked. Salem was quiet for a very long time. "No," he said. "I cannot." Toby reached over and took his hand. They stayed on that rooftop until the sky turned pink and the mosques called the city to prayer. They didn't speak much more. There was nothing else to plan. They simply held on, both knowing the world they were returning to had no room for what they had found, and both deciding quietly to bring it home anyway. Home hit differently now. Toby rode back into Adara on a brown horse, his dreadlocks tied back, copper rings catching the afternoon sun. The people cheered. Children ran beside his horse. His father's palace rose above the red hills, grand and familiar and suffocating. King Ade was a big man, wide in the chest, gray at the temples, with a voice that had decided wars. He received Toby in the throne room with a cup of palm wine and a firm hand on his shoulder. "Good trip?" the king asked. "Productive," Toby said. "The northern chiefs are open to trade." "Good. Good." King Ade studied his son's face a moment too long. "You look different." "I'm tired from the road." The king nodded slowly. He did not press. In Seoul, Salem arrived to similar ceremony. His mother, Queen Nadia, was sharp and elegant. She noticed things. She noticed that her son was quieter than usual, that his smile came from somewhere else now. Did something happen in Kano? She asked that evening. Nothing unusual, Salem said. She watched him leave the room with the eyes of a woman who had raised him and knew every version of his silences. Back in Adara, word had already reached the palace gossips. A servant had seen Prince Toby in Kano, walking the streets at strange hours with a sole man. It was a small murmur, barely a rumor. But in palaces, small things grew fast. Toby's uncle Dara came to find him that night. Dara was his father's younger brother, charming, soft-spoken, with the permanent expression of a man who was helping. He always seemed to be standing nearby. I heard Kano was eventful, Dara said, handing Toby a cup of tea with a gentle smile. Toby took the cup and said nothing. Dara smiled wider. Rest well, nephew. He left before Toby could read what was behind his eyes. They had agreed on a system before leaving Kano. A trusted trader named Bello traveled between the two kingdoms regularly, neutral, quiet, discreet. He carried cloth and spices, and now, hidden in the lining of his bag, he carried letters. Toby's letters were long. He wrote the way he talked, slow, deliberate, warm. He described the hills at sunrise. He described missing a specific laugh. He never used Salem's name. He called him the man from the north. Salem's letters were shorter but sharper. He had a poet's precision. He could say in 10 words what took others 40. He called Toby the one with copper rings. For 3 months they wrote. It kept them sane. It also kept the fire burning when distance might have slowly put it out. Then Salem wrote something different. I want to see you. I cannot pretend this is letters. Come to the border forest at the start of next month. I will come from my side. Bello knows the meeting point. Tell me yes or no. Toby read it twice. Then he wrote back one word. Yes. They met in the forest at the edge of both kingdoms, where the trees were so thick that neither kingdom truly claimed the land. It was neutral ground, accidental and perfect. Salem arrived first. He was leaning against a tall Irako tree when Toby rode through the brush, his dreadlocks loose around his shoulders. They stood a few feet apart and just looked at each other the way people do when they have been existing only in their own imagination for too long. You're real, Salem said. Toby laughed, that slow, rare smile breaking open. Did you think I wasn't? Sometimes I wondered. They sat on the roots of the old tree and talked until the sun dropped. They met like that 4 more times over the following months. Each time felt like a small stolen life. A version of the world where the two kingdoms had never decided to hate each other. But secrets in forest do not stay in forests. King Ade summoned Toby with no warning. He was sitting in the throne room alone when Toby entered. No advisors, no guards. Just the king and a carved wooden chair and a silence that weighed more than furniture. Sit, the king said. Toby sat. Tell me about the man from Seoul. The room went very still. Toby kept his face calm even as his chest tightened. Father. Do not, King Ade said quietly. Not angrily. Quietly. Which was worse. Do not begin with that word and then lie to me. Toby breathed. His name is Salem. He is the crown prince of Seoul. I met him in Kano. He paused. I love him. Silence. King Ade stood and walked to the window. He looked out over his red hills for a very long time. This cannot happen, he said at last. Father. He is Seoul, Toby. Do you understand what that means? My people lost brothers to that family. My own father lost an eye in their war. And you want to bring their son into this palace as what? Your husband? Yes, Toby said. Simply. Clearly. The king turned. His face held something complicated, not just anger. Something older. Something afraid. Leave, he said. We will speak again when you are thinking properly. In Seoul, the same conversation happened in a different room. Queen Nadia wept. Salem's father, King Musa, threw a cup against the wall. He called it shameful twice. Once for the kingdom of soulless enemy, once for the nature of the love itself. Salem stood through all of it and said one thing, I am not ashamed. That single sentence enraged King Musa more than anything else. Both princes were quietly forbidden from leaving the palace. But no one thought to ask where Dara had gone. Salem disappeared on a Tuesday. His morning guards found his room empty. His horse was still in the stable. His shoes were still beside the bed. But Salem was gone with no message, no sign of struggle, just absence. Seoul fell into immediate chaos. King Musa summoned every general. Soldiers flooded the city gates. Messengers rode in all directions. Within hours, one thing became clear. The last person seen near Salem's wing of the palace was a stranger who had entered through a servant's entrance. A man from Adara. That was what the witness said. A man from Adara. In the palace of Seoul, That sentence was a lit match thrown into dry grass. King Musa stood before his council, face hard as carved stone. Adara has taken my son, he said. They will return him or they will know war. When the message reached King Ade, he read it standing and then sat down very slowly. Toby came running. Where is he? Toby demanded. Father, where is Salem? Did you? I did nothing, King Ade said. His voice was sharp but his eyes were uncertain. Toby stared at his father for a long moment. He believed him. Which terrified him more, because if his father hadn't done it, then someone else had, and the kingdoms were about to go to war over a lie. We have to find him, Toby said, before someone does something that cannot be undone. King Ade looked at his son, at the dreadlocks loose with urgency, at the fear that wasn't fear for himself, and something in the old king's chest moved quietly. But he said nothing. In the border forest, in an old hunter's shelter hidden under thick cover, Salem sat with his wrists tied and a blindfold recently removed. He was not harmed. But he was watched by 3 silent men. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know who had taken him. But when he heard the voice that finally spoke to him from the doorway, he recognized the accent immediately. It was someone from Adara. 3,000 soldiers gathered at the border. Sol came from the east, armed with long spears and mounted archers. Adara came from the west with cavalry and war drums that could be heard for miles. Both armies stopped just short of crossing. Waiting, trembling with tension, generals holding back men who had waited years for exactly this kind of permission. Toby stood at his father's side but he could barely breathe. He kept thinking about the border forest, the Irako tree, the way Salem leaned against it and said sometimes I wondered. Father, he said, please, give me one day before you order this. Sol has made their position clear. One day. Toby turned to face the king directly. If Salem is truly in Adara, I will find him. If he is not, then we have evidence to stop this. One day. King Ade studied his son's face. He had looked at that face since it was a small thing, round and squalling. He knew every part of it. He saw that this was not politics speaking. One day, the king said, then I cannot hold the generals. Toby rode hard. He went to the one person in all of Adara who might know things that others didn't, Bello the trader. Bello moved through people like water. He heard everything. Bello met him at the edge of the city market, face tight with something he had been holding for days. I didn't know what it meant until now, Bello said quietly. But 3 weeks ago, Prince Dara hired 4 men and rented the old hunter's shelter near the northern trees. Toby felt the ground shift beneath him. Dara, his own uncle. He didn't wait to process it. He pulled his horse around and rode north, pushing the animal as hard as it would go, his dreadlocks flying behind him, copper rings catching the last of the afternoon light. He reached the shelter as the sun touched the horizon. He hit the door with his shoulder and broke it open. Salem was inside. Salem looked up when the door burst open. He had been sitting with his back against the wall, arms tied, jaw set, wearing the expression of a man who had decided to wait calmly for the world to sort itself out. He had not cried. He had not begged his guards. He had simply sat and been very still inside himself. When he saw Toby standing in the doorway, breathing hard, dreadlocks wild, eyes scanning the room with something close to panic, Salem let out one slow breath. You took too long, Salem said. Toby crossed the room in 4 steps and pulled him forward, cutting the ropes with a small knife from his belt. He held Salem's face in both hands and looked at him the way you look at something you almost lost. Are you hurt? Toby asked. No. Are you sure? Toby. Salem put his hand over Toby's. I'm sure. The 4 guards had fled when they heard the horse approach. Dara had paid them, not trained them. They were not loyal men. Just hired ones. Toby and Salem rode together back toward the border, side by side, fast and silent. When they came over the last hill and saw the 2 armies still facing each other across the plain below, torches lit, war drums quiet but present, thousands of men waiting, both princes stopped their horses at the top. This is what we caused, Salem said. This is what Dara caused, Toby said firmly. Salem looked at him. They will ask questions about us. About why it happened. Everything will come out. I know. Are you ready for that? Toby looked out at the armies, at the 2 flags of 2 kingdoms that had hated each other before either of them was born. Then he looked at Salem. Ride down with me, Toby said. Let them see us together. Salem straightened in his saddle. They rode down the hill side by side, directly between the 2 armies, in the narrow space where no blood had yet been spilled. Every eye turned to watch them. The two kings were brought to the center ground. King Ade arrived with his generals. King Musa arrived with his own, hand on the hilt of his sword, eyes moving first to his son, checking, assessing, and then to Toby beside him. Toby stepped forward. The man who took Prince Salem was not sent by Adara, he said, his voice carrying across the plain. It was Prince Dara, my uncle. He hired men to take Salem and leave evidence pointing to our kingdom, because he wanted this war. A murmur moved through both armies. Toby pulled forward one of the hired guards who had been captured as they fled, a man who was very willing to talk once he understood what he'd been part of. The guard told everything. The money, the orders, the instruction to let the witness see his Adara-made sandals. King Ade stood very still through all of it. He looked like a man watching the floor of something he believed in crack open slowly. King Musa looked at Salem for a long time. Then he looked at the armies he had nearly sent to die. Dara had not expected anyone to find Salem so quickly. He had expected the battle to begin before questions could be asked. He had underestimated Toby. He had also underestimated how fast rumors move, because by the time soldiers were sent to bring him forward, Dara had already heard what was happening. He walked out himself. He was still smiling that soft, helpful smile of his. This is a misunderstanding, he said pleasantly, addressing both kings. Arrest him, King Ade said, quietly, the way he always spoke when something was decided forever. Soldiers moved toward Dara from both sides. And that was when the smile dropped. Dara moved fast, faster than anyone expected from a man who had spent years being helpful and nearby. He had a short blade at his waist. He had carried it his whole life. He pulled it out, and he drove it into Salem's side. Everything happened at once. Dara was taken to the ground by 6 soldiers before he could move again. Salem dropped. Toby caught him before he hit the earth. One arm around his back, one hand pressing hard against the wound, his face very close to Salem's. Stay, Toby said. It wasn't even a request. It was something else. Something older. Salem's eyes were open. His jaw was tight with pain. I'm here, he managed. The camp healers came running. King Musa was there in seconds, kneeling in the dirt in his royal robes without caring. He took his son's hand and held it the way fathers do when rank means nothing. King Ade stood close, watching, his face stripped of everything political. The blade had gone deep but missed the center. The healers worked fast. The army held its breath. Dara was taken away in chains. He did not speak again. His smile was finally, permanently gone. Salem did not die. It took weeks, and there were 2 difficult nights in the first one where things could have gone either way. Toby did not leave the tent. He slept in a chair beside the bed, his dreadlocks pulled loosely to one side, copper rings dull in the lamplight. Sometimes Salem woke in the night and Toby was already awake, watching. You should sleep, Salem told him once. I will, Toby said. Later. When Salem was strong enough to sit up, both kings came to visit together, an image that would have been impossible a month before. They sat on opposite ends of the same bench, uncomfortable and careful with each other, learning how to exist in the same air without old anger filling the space between them. King Musa spoke first. He looked at his son and then at Toby and he said, slowly as if the words were new in his mouth, I will not pretend I understand everything. But I understand what I almost lost. King Ade nodded. As do I. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Salem and Toby were married the following year in the border forest, under the old Irako tree, with Bello as witness and both kingdoms watching from a cautious, curious, slowly warming distance. The copper rings in Toby's dreadlocks caught the morning light. Salem laughed at something Toby whispered and the sound moved through the trees like something free. The war between the kingdoms ended not with a treaty, not with a battle won, but with 2 men who refused to stop.
Thank you for watching. Kindly do well to subscribe, like, and share. Also, let me know in the comment section what you thought about the story. See you on the next story. Bye.